Everybody, welcome to another episode of Life Talks. Today I have Timothy Reigle. You can find him on Twitter at Timothy Reigle, TimothyReigle. On Twitter, Timothy overcame a 15-year porn and sex addiction. He coaches men to live porn-free by renewing faith, re-energizing families, and restoring masculinity. His book is available on Amazon, Living Porn-Free, 10 Steps to Recovery, Redemption, and Renewal. Got it right here. Got my copy here. And real quick, interesting on the cover, what I noticed, which was really stood out to me, you have the cracked screen. And then over here, you have low battery, low service, and low Wi-Fi. And that's that. I actually just saw that looking at it. And I can actually relate to that. I never had the cracked screen, but my phone was always low battery, low, it was always low battery when I was in that state where we're just like, for me, I had porn addiction, similar to you, where it was everything was low battery, low energy, low, I didn't have that vision, and I was stuck in that rut for a long time. So maybe we could start. You have a saying that you say a lot is porn isn't about sex, it's about pain. What do you mean by that?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on. I'm really glad to be here with you. Porn addiction, I say all the time, it's not about pleasure. It's not about sex. It's about pain. It's about a way to escape pain. And that's something that's really hard for people to understand, especially wives or girlfriends, of men who are struggling with this, because they see it as a betrayal of them, which it is, absolutely. But it's not that these men, myself, anybody else who's struggled with this, are just total perverts. It's not that we're hornier than everybody else or have a higher sex drive or just can't control ourselves. Porn addiction and sexual activity is how we've learned to cope with pain. Most men, myself included, got addicted to porn at a young age, and it's getting younger all the time. I was 12, 13, 14, somewhere in there. And a lot of the guys I coach, it's 8, 9, 10, where they're being first exposed to porn. And so they're learning that this feels good. It's an escape. It's a release. It can be a distraction. And so at that young age, they are molding their brains. Their brains are spongy, literally. That's not the medical term, but they're still being formed. And so they're learning these methods of dealing with negative emotions, negative things, anything in their life, just normal teenage stuff. It doesn't have to be major trauma. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's just normal teenage stuff. And they're learning to use porn to cope with those emotions and to handle those sort of things that are difficult to handle. So as they get older, it becomes their coping mechanism. They run to porn anytime something bad happens, or even sometimes anytime something good happens. And are using it as their pressure release valve. And that becomes inherent. It becomes a addictive behavior. It becomes their coping mechanism. It becomes their self-medication. But there's also a medical scientific side to it where they get chemically addicted to the dopamine release that's released at orgasm. And so the brain actually creates new neural pathways in the brain so that they get there quicker. And they need more. And just like any other drug, you need more and more to do it. Well, you need more and more porn to get that same high, that same release, that same, fix. So it becomes not a sexual issue. It becomes an emotional issue. And people learn to deal with pain through this. And then as they get older, it becomes worse and worse. And everything they go to, whether it's work, marriage, job, life, kids, stress, just life in general, this is how they learn to deal with it. And so it becomes an issue of pain, not about being super horny or anything like that.
Yeah, I completely agree. And something you just said there that really connects with me is when there's those moments of the highs and the lows. So now the highs could be like, oh, I just had a small win in life. And now it's like, all right, I'm going to sex. I feel good. So now I want to keep that going. And the same thing in the lows. Oh, I feel guilt or I feel shame. Even if it's unconscious, it's going into those patterns. And you talk about it in your book too, even being in states where you're stagnant, which we can go into further, because I know you're someone who's deeply religious based on the posts that I've seen. And I agree with that because, the 7 deadly sins and things like that are more than just, oh, it's in the Bible. No, they're actually
Mhm.
principles that, when expressed, they decay your soul, or you can, feed them for growth in the opposite direction. I think for me too, it was the toxic masculinity culture. Is how does a man be a man? You say in your book, it's important to have networking and having someone to keep you accountable. And I'm a full agreement. And that's in part, as I mentioned before this call, just meeting with Zach Small and like-minded men like himself who, have the ability to keep each other accountable. Why do you say in your book it's important? And maybe if you could just talk about the differences between the masculine and the feminine, because I think for me, it was like I was raised by a single mother. I never had someone who was a father figure. My father was there, but he had his own trauma. He had his own pain. And the way my mother was a good mother, but she wasn't a good father. So maybe if you could speak on that, the masculine aspect of it, because in a world where people are told, oh, you're toxic masculine, if you're expressing your masculine, how do you digest that?
Right. So I think that the masculine side of it comes down to someone being a father for you. I think a lot of it comes down to having someone to guide you and teach you how to be a man. And this goes far beyond porn addiction, but specifically porn addiction, teaching you how to deal with emotions and how to handle them. Men are very different from women, but that doesn't mean men aren't emotional.
Correct.
So, and you get these conflicting ideas of, and neither are correct. You see the whole pro masculinity side, and maybe even traditional masculinity was you don't ever show emotion ever. You hide it, you bottle it up, you deal with it. And there's some truth to that. As a man, you're and especially in a family sense, you're to be the strong one. You're to be the rock, the support of everybody else. And you lean on other men when in your weak spots. You don't, show your weakness to your family, and you need to be strong for them. And then you're vulnerable with other men. So, and then there's the kind of the modern masculinity where it is you just bear all your emotions on your sleeve like women.
Yeah.
The truth is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
We don't want to be this complete stone wall where you never have any emotion and never emotionally connect with anyone or anything like that. But you don't want to be a bleeding heart, because that's not masculine either. So it comes down to us as fathers to teach our sons how that works and teach them that balance and teach them how to process emotions in a healthy way. And I think a failure of that has led to a lot of this porn addiction, because men are stuck. Well, which side do I go? Do I just bottle it up? Do I let it out? What do I do? And then it ends up coming out through porn, through sex, through all these different things, because that's the natural, men have a naturally sex drive, and that's good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But that's where it comes out, because they have nowhere else to express those feelings, express those emotions. And so it comes out through porn and sex. A good friend of mine, Pastor Michael Foster, wrote a excellent piece about how the fight against porn addiction in men begins when kids are toddlers, which sounds completely crazy. And he's not advocating that you have the birds and the bees talk with a 3-year-old.
No, I get it.
But what he does say is that it starts with not porn, not sex, not anything like that. It starts with kids, teaching them moderation, teaching them self-control, teaching them that they can't have 12 popsicles after dinner, teaching kids those values and teaching them those standards and dealing with what their desires are and what they feel like they can do, and teaching them that moderation and that control. So when they are 12, 13, 14 years old, then they have that basis of dealing with things, dealing with urges, dealing with impulses, dealing with desires inherent in them, because they were taught that at a young age. And so then they're much more likely not to engage in the self-destructive, indulgent behavior that we see so many young men doing with porn and sex.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Definitely implementing those systems as, a parent does for their child. That's, I mean, I'm a product of my parents big time. They did the best that they could too. I
Mhm.
went through a phase where I had resentment. Part of me had resentment. It's like, well, why didn't they teach me this? They were supposed to know everything. And that kind of just blew over, which is like, no, they're just like me. They were trying to do the best that they could. And I completely agree with, raising kids that right way by setting that up. And also, I've learned too the ability to make mistakes. I've always heard that motivational videos in life, but that is so powerful. Zach was actually talking about that the other day with like when his kids are doing something, allowing them to make those mistakes because
Right.
then they get to learn that. So if they're eating too much sugar, go ahead, eat all the cookies. See how you got a stomach ache now. Okay, so maybe we
Right.
learned that balance. Rather than you're not going to have any cookies, right? It's like no, there has. But I think I definitely agree with you on that.
And I don't want people to get the impression that it all comes down to your parents sucked,
yeah,
and so I want to cut some slack for parents,
correct.
especially, I don't know how old you are. I'm 35. So I'm
32.
kind of the classic right smack in the middle of the millennials. And to cut our parents some slack, they didn't know what they were up against.
Correct.
I got into porn at kind of the advent of internet porn.
Yep.
The late 90s, early 2000s, mid 2000s when I was in high school. That's where obviously the tech grew, but so did the internet porn along with it. So, it used to be you just had to keep your kids away from Playboys and penthouses and out of
Yeah.
the creepy back room of the video rental store.
Yep.
Now, and when I was a teenager, I was all on the computer and online. Now every kid's got it right here in front of them. So to cut our parents some slack, things change so quickly technologically that they didn't necessarily know how to handle it or what to handle it. So I give them some slack there. But I do believe our generation and teaching our kids, we do know what we're up against. Correct. Because we dealt with it. We know the dangers. We know that kids can access porn on their smartphones 24/7, anytime, any place, anywhere. And not just porn. I mean, they're being funneled into porn from TikTok, Instagram, everything else are just funnels for porn, and they're getting sent to that. So we now have a responsibility because we know what we're up against. We have a responsibility to our kids to teach them.
Yeah, I agree. It's absolutely our responsibility through our understanding, because when we understand that it's a problem and we recognize that internally, then we bear the burden of responsibility to share that with others completely.
Right.
What would you say? Because I wanted to ask this question because this is something that I went through in my life. Because one of the, you said the problem with it's a heart problem. I was listening to it in your podcast with Zach where you were saying that if you're an alcoholic, you dump the alcohol. That doesn't fix the problem. You have to fix the heart. And for a long time, I did not get that. I would hear that sounded poetic to me, but it wasn't until I was actually having almost like a chest pain and it was this weight that was just like, okay, I'm hiding for so long. I've become so ignorant to my own vice that it's just, I'm blocking out so much and I'm thinking I have a physical problem. No, it truly was a spiritual problem. It was a heart issue of trauma. And for me, it was external validation, which seems to be a lot of the case. I need that love, mommy's love, rather than, as you said, the father's love, the ability to endure, because life is going to throw punches at you. And being with that uncomfortability has allowed my character to develop so much more. The pain of going through stopping porn. Well, I'm at a place where it's like, it's actually a beautiful pain. It's like now I'm returning to that ability to endure. Now something that was a mountain is just a speed bump. With life, there's a bill or something comes up or a deceased loved one, something like that. I have the ability to endure and I have so much more appreciation growing into that. But when I would share this with some of my friends or people, in my network growing up, I would say, oh, it's porn. It's not a big deal. It's not an issue. So deep down, they were going off their programming, but somewhere deep down, I was like, no, this is off. What would you say to someone who says, well, porn isn't really a big deal and it's natural and it's healthy to watch it? And they're coming from a good place, right? Because they don't want to shame you. But going back to what you said before, the father principle, to me, a good father has the ability to tear you down, but from a place of love that you build you up. It's not a hate. It's like a tough love. What would you say to somebody who kind of says, no, it's natural, it's healthy to watch it?
Right. I would say porn is fake. Porn is not an accurate depiction of sex. People are learning about sex from porn and think that's what sex is really like. And it's not. It's fake. Everything about it is fake. So it's fake sex. It's fake methods and types of sex. It's fake people. You're treating your brain. You're trying to trick your brain into thinking that you're having sex with these women in the videos when you're really not. You're sitting alone in bed jerking off.
Yeah.
I mean, to be a little graphic, but that's the truth, you know. So I would almost turn that on them. What do you think this really brings you? All you're doing is running away from everything. You're trying to escape it, and people will say, "Yeah, oh, it's just a healthy release. It's just it's a release of stress. It's a release of whatever." You want to relieve stress, go for a walk, read a book, meditate. Do all those things have positive things for you.
Yeah.
All porn does is get you deeper and deeper and deeper into it and give you more shame. There's a term that's come out recently in the past few years, and it's an interesting term. It's called post-nut clarity. And so what it's describing is
all about it.
your mind frame after you watch porn, and really orgasm is what it is.
Correct.
It's almost like flipping a switch. So you'll be watching porn, masturbating, and you'll orgasm. And then all of a sudden it's like a switch flips. You're like, dude, I just wasted an hour.
Yeah.
Just jerking off to whatever, and you feel that shame, and you feel that you feel terrible. So it's not really a stress relief. It's like a mirage in the desert. It promises quenching your thirst, and all it does is make you thirstier. Yeah. And it gets people into deeper activity. I always say porn is a gateway drug. It's a path to deeper and deeper sexual issues, and just keeps you from dealing with the issues that are really at the cause. It was for me. It wasn't just porn. It got into webcams and chat rooms and then hookups and all that sort of stuff too. No, not everybody goes that route, but it is a gateway drug to that.
It's the same thing though. Like you said, it's pain. It doesn't matter. It may be expressed differently in different people's lives, but the more you understand that pain, that's how you can really have compassion for people and not see it as they're not doing it to other people. They're hurting inside.
Right. And that's why it's so hard for people to quit. When people do realize it's a problem, they think, oh, well, this is just a habit for my stress release. Well, it's not. It's so much more with that. It's a heart issue. And that's why so many men end up relapsing, because they treat it like it's just a bad habit. Now, there are habitual aspects to it, but they just try to quit, white knuckle it, or do different things to break a habit. But like the analogy that you mentioned, it's like an alcoholic pouring a booze down the drain. Yeah, that takes away that opportunity, takes away that temptation, but it doesn't deal with why they started drinking in the first place.
Yeah.
This is the same way. We need to deal with why you're running away to porn and sex to deal with things, not just break the habits. Now, there's habits that are part of it. You need to get routine. You need to have those. I'm a firm advocate of blocking software, covenant eyes, things like that. You need to avoid triggers. You need to have methods to deal with triggers. You need to have accountability. You need to have all these things. These are good habitual things to have. But unless you deal with the core root cause, the core emotional reason, whatever that may be, and that's hard to figure out. Like you mentioned, self-validation, rejection, not feeling good enough, a lot of these things, you're never going to break free from it. And so that's why so many guys can only go 2 weeks or a month or something like that, because they can force themselves to go that long out of habit. But eventually, once those emotions and those heart issues start creeping back in, they can't overcome it because they didn't deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. You say triggers lead to fantasizing. Fantasizing leads to ritualization. Ritualization then leads to acting out. Identifying what your triggers are is essential to breaking your addictive cycle and living porn free. And I think adding to that too, well, what you had just said, adding to the alcohol thing, otherwise it becomes whack-a-mole. You knock that down and now something else pops up.
Right.
You stop porn. Now I need validation here or whatever it may be. So what was I going to say? You have a tweet here. You say one night stands create a deeper scar on your soul that they do notches on your bedpost. I love it. Now, when somebody cuts out porn, right? Because this is something that, because for me to stop my habit, I had to give the devil his due. In other words, I'm getting something feels good. So to tell my mind, say, oh, just stop. Why would I want to stop feeling good? No, I have to create a new paradigm through understanding those triggers that says, oh, all right, well, you're obviously getting something out of this, but you're going to get so much more out of this. So I had to create a better vision. And then it becomes, like you say, like that balancing act. What would you say to people who, maybe they've identified the issue, they've just stopped, which will bring me on to the next question I have about it as far as rewiring the brain. But what would you say to someone who, maybe we could say the difference between lust and love? Because obviously sex should be a beautiful thing. It should be something that binds you with somebody that you really care about. And, how to incorporate I guess the loving nature that is sex is a byproduct of it rather than seeking it first. Whereas I would say is lust.
Yeah. More sex won't cure a porn addiction. It won't. A lot of guys, especially married guys, think that, oh, well, if my wife would just have more sex with me, I wouldn't have the porn addiction.
Yeah.
But then at the same time, a lot of time guys don't get so addicted to porn, they don't really want to have sex. They'd rather watch porn than have sex.
Yeah.
So more sex in general won't solve it. But being able to fix those emotional issues in yourself, where you can have actual loving, caring, and emotional connection, an intimate connection with your spouse, with your wife, more of that sex will most certainly help a porn addiction.
Yeah. So how do you bridge that gap? Because that's something that for me, it's
right.
still something. It's 15 years. And I was like, all right, well, I shut it off in a month, which you actually talk about as well. And it's like, well, my brain isn't fully rewired yet. So even though my mindset is right, the navigation just started. Right. So
we think that intimacy will come from sex because sex is the most intimate act. We think that's the most intimate thing, and it is. And we think, oh, well, if you have sex, you'll get those emotional, intimate connections, which is what you're really desiring. You're not really seeking out sex or seeking out the intimacy from sex. But the reality is the other way around. Great intimacy leads to great sex. So I think a lot of intimacy as kind of a pyramid where sex is the pinnacle. So we need, especially in a marriage relationship, we need those building blocks of intimacy. We need the emotional connection, the non-sexual physical connection, the spiritual connection, all those sort of things that build up. And then, yes, sex becomes the ultimate intimate act. We get it backwards. We tried, trickle down economics doesn't work with sex. We try, we'll do the most intimate thing. We will, we'll get all those other feelings of intimacy and connection and desiring and acceptance. And that's why that treat that you brought up is so true. There's no such thing as casual sex. We were designed by God for sex to be an intimate act, not just physically intimate, emotionally intimate, spiritually intimate. That's how it was designed. It's a good thing. Society has turned that completely around. So one night stands are a scar in your heart because you're thinking you're going to get all of these intimate things when it really all you're getting is the physical, and you messes your brain up because your brain is hardwired by God to think that sex is an intimate act. And so when you do it casually, you're taking all that out of it, but your brain still thinks that it's an intimate act. And so you end up empty because you're searching at your core for all those other building blocks of intimacy and you're not getting it. So in a marriage relationship, you need to build all those other levels of intimacy, and then that passionate, intimate sex will come. It's not the other way around. And that's how we've gotten it so backwards, where we've tried to get intimacy from sex instead of building intimacy to get good sex.
Yeah. Through trust. And that brings me to the next question here, whereas your tweet says you cannot defeat porn addiction in 30 days. Now you can stop watching and break habits in 30 days, but you won't heal the wounds that caused your addiction in the first place. That takes time, self-reflection, reprogramming your brain. What would you
Right.
tell someone who has had recently quit porn and wants to regain their natural balance of dopamine and rewire their brain to its natural balance state? Like, what are some things that people can do? And I know the example of maybe, working out or replacing those negatives with positives, but any other thing, what can people do more of to maybe accelerate that process of rewiring it?
Right. In some ways, it just takes time.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and that's the point of that
That's the
tweet.
answer.
Yeah,
That's yeah.
you can stop watching porn, and you can kind of force yourself to stop watching it. But often that doesn't work, and that's why guys relapse so much, because they aren't dealing with the core issue. You need to deal with those core issues, or you're going to end up relapsing back to porn, or you'll just end up using something else to deal with it. So, but some ways to do that in the meantime is through self-reflection, journaling, meditation, working with, this is my self-plug, working with a coach, working with accountability partners to deal with those emotional issues and break in there. And so then you can learn and put some of these things in place to when you feel that urge and you want to act out and you want to reach out to porn, to redirect that into something else. Not redirect that as a distraction, but redirect it into a healthy way of dealing with it. So once you start realizing what your triggers are, start realizing kind of what your ritualistic aspects of it, you can find, okay, I'm feeling this. I need to get this out in some way. So you can journal through that. Yes, you can exercise, you can go for a run, you can do all those things, and are all good things, but you need to process what you're feeling in those moments, not just get rid of it. So I have a system that I use, and you might have read this in the book, that's called the 4 R's. So when you're dealing with being triggered by something where you feel, either you had a really bad day, or you were triggered by some image of some girl on social media, whatever it might be, whatever it is, you're feeling this urge to look at porn, to masturbate, to do whatever.
Yeah, real quick on that. It's not even just porn. It's like you said before, it's Instagram, it's Snapchat, it's these social medias that it's just like, oh, there's a picture of an ass, and then bam, that becomes a trigger.
Right. So the 4 R's are remove. So that's remove the trigger. So that's get off the computer, get off the phone, walk away, remove yourself. If you're in a situation, you leave, do that, get away from it. The second is refocus. So that is, directing your attention somewhere else, go work out, go do something that requires focus and attention. Whatever that may be for you, that's different for everybody. Do something that you refocus your mind, so that your mind doesn't start going in the fantasy lands and get those gears turning, and then you get in trouble. Reach out is one of them. So reach out to your accountability partner. If you're in a tight spot and you're feeling in a bad place, that's what you need, your accountability partner. That's what I provide to the guys I coach. If they're in a bad spot, they can text me, they can call me. It's like, okay, what's going on? How did we get here? How can we redirect this into a better way so that we're not going out to porn and we're processing these emotions in a healthy way and going through it? What's really going on? And the last thing is to reflect. So that's the journaling, the meditation, the prayer, the scripture, all those sort of things. Processing what happened, or if you did have a relapse and you weren't able to stop it, okay, well, go back and do kind of a after action report here and reflect on those things. Figure out what went wrong. What could you have done different? What can you do differently the next time if you're in the same situation, so that you can, maybe if you failed this time, well, next time, how can I be better prepared? What can I do differently? So those are all different things you can do to start retraining your brain. Start reversing all that damage that's been done, to where your mind just has that trigger and then instantly wants to go to porn and sex. And then it just takes time. I mean, there is a withdrawal factor to it, because it is a chemical addiction of dopamine and all the hormones and everything that's released in the brain. That just takes time. If you spent 10, 15 years in this addiction, you're not going to undo that process in a month. You're just not.
Correct.
You're not. The science isn't there to have that. It takes time. Some experts have said it can take a year or two to reprogram your brain. And that seems overwhelming to people. But that's the truth of it. It takes a long time to reprogram your brain, to learn how to process his emotions and to break those habits. There's all those things that come into it. That's why, 30 days, yeah, you can start that process and you can see some great success in 30 days. And that's awesome. But you're not going to truly heal the wound and be in full recovery in 30 days. And that's, I'm not one of these guys, especially in my coaching. I'm not a, 90 days of health, wealth, and happiness guy.
Yeah.
Because it takes more than that. Maybe I'd sell more books if I if I advertised it that way, but that's not the truth of the battle. It's not. It's a process.
I think the fourth R is for me the most powerful. I mean, the reflection is, I mean, you are a mirror to the world. I mean, if you have hatred in your heart, you're going to see hatred in other people. Changing gears a little bit, how has religion really connected, a lot of the pieces for you? Because for me, I was raised Catholic. I reject the institution and the dogma, but the message is so clear. In the same way that I reject, you don't have to go to college to be someone who's wise, but it can be a tool in the same way church can be a tool for people. Maybe if you can go into a little bit of that, because for me, if I really want to convert people to be a follower of Christ in the realest sense, I would have to embody that within myself, not worry about trying to say, hey, are you Christian? Or again, these shame and guilt, you better do this. And I think that turns a lot of people away from religion. But in my own understanding, it's like, no, they're so simple. It's like the kingdom of heaven is within. That just means to me, putting your trust in God is really going internal. Trying to be born again is the death of the ego. It's not always going to be a beauty. It's not like, oh, I go to church, I'm so happy. No, it's like, it's a painful process, but it's a good pain. It's like going to the gym. It's like, it's the most painful process was exposing my own bullshit. When I got to that point where I'm like, you know what? I don't mind being naked in the sense of like, this is my shit. Here it is. That was a painful process, but it was it was the best thing I could do. And to me, that's really spiritual. That's really spiritual. I'm putting Facebook quotes saying, oh, I'm spirit. No, I'm not religious. I'm spiritual. To me, that's so anti-spiritual, like much of the time. So maybe if you could dive into what was your connection with that, right? Like to become more of a religious man in the truest sense.
Right. Well, I grew up in the church. My dad was a pastor. I spent my entire childhood and my entire life in the church. I never rejected my faith. Throughout my entire addiction and affairs and cheating and everything that I did, I knew it was wrong in my heart. And I knew it was sinful in my heart. But it was just something I couldn't overcome by myself. I needed help. I needed guidance from mentors and coaches and things like that. And I needed help from God. Now, that being said, I don't think that you have to be a Christian to want to quit watching porn. There's obvious physical things, psychological things, there's consequences and damage from porn that go far beyond the fact that it's a sin in the eyes of God. But I do believe that it is sinful. I do believe God doesn't want us to that. It's that we have distorted God's design for sexuality through that. Now, we've done a bad job of, especially in the church, of teaching our young people, young men especially, about porn and sex. When I was a kid, it was just the big three were don't drink, don't smoke, and don't have sex. Well, the time you're a curious 13, 14-year-old boy, what are the three things you want to do? And that's exactly what I did. Because it was just harped into you, and a good intention thing of promoting abstinence, of promoting that sex is for marriage, which I firmly believe that. But the church over time has just beaten that into people so hardly and not done anything else to teach young people about sex and what it is and what's God's design for it and what it is and what it isn't and what it should be, that they've created this shame level to where we feel like sex is shameful and bad, and it's just beaten into it so bad. So when you have a 13, 14-year-old boy that's been just drilled into him, then he comes across porn and says, oh, this is fun. This is exciting. This feels good. This is great. I've been lied to. Well, no, they haven't been lied to, but it's just been so browbeaten him without any other education or any other teaching, that it goes down that bad path. In my case, I needed God's help to beat it. And this is where I think, no, you don't have to be a Christian. You don't need to believe in God to want to quit pornography. But God will give you the tools to do it. God will give you the strength that you don't have. God will give you the courage that you don't have on your own. He'll help you. You can go to him to release some of these feelings of shame. When you don't feel like you're forgivable, there's certainly times in my life, look at all the things I did. I spent 15 years addicted to porn. I cheated on my wife. I did all these things. I don't feel forgivable. I feel like a piece of shit. He forgives me. He paid the price for that sin. I can take that shame and I can lay it down at the feet of the cross and give him that pain, give him that things. When I'm feeling all these things that I can't process, I can give it to him to process. He can handle that for me. He can be my rock. He can be my shield, my fortress that I go to in times of trouble, as the psalmist wrote. And that's what we have, what Christians have, and have that deep faith have that other people don't. People who don't believe in God have nowhere to go with these things. They're stuck in that shame. They have to wear that shame for the rest of their lives and have nowhere to process it. And so that's when, even if they get away from porn, it comes out in other areas. I can take that shame and I can give it to Jesus. I can give it to him. And he can wear that shame. He wore that shame. He wore my sin on the cross and died so that I don't have to pay the penalty for that. And people who don't believe that don't have that hope. They don't have that assurance. They don't have that forgiveness. And having that, knowing that I don't have to be perfect. Yes, I want to strive to follow God's law. But even if I fail, he's there to forgive me. And he's going to give me the tools, and he's going to give me the strength and the courage to get past it and to deal with it in a proper way so that I can heal and move forward with my life.
Now, how do you find, because for me, I think, adding on that, for me, I want to convert people to believers, right, within themselves, within their heart.
Of course.
And to me, that's so, especially now, you see the political divide. It's like left versus right. There's so much division. Right. And I find very few people embodying those aspects of that spirit of the Father, the one who sees someone who's on the left, on the right, as both their children, or even in the Bible, it says, go after the one who runs away, right? It's essentially going out of your way to help the person who's the one. What would you say what is the best way to convert others, in the sense of, when I say convert specifically, to not make it that dogmatic thing? Because every time I say that word, I say Jesus or Christ or religion, to me, those are trigger words that turn people off. It turns people off when they hear religion or Jesus or that. So what can people do? Maybe people are present. What would you say? Because if I really want people to follow what I believe in, I can't push it on them. And when you talk a lot about that, it made me think, like, the power of paradoxes. The higher truth I think you become, the more I see so many paradoxes. It's like, he who knows everything knows nothing. And right. It's like, the more you need validation, the less you get it. It's like, wow, these paradoxes come up more and more and more. And in the same way, the more you push something, the more it goes away. So maybe if you could share, like, what are some tools in order to really be there for people who, it's like, they're suffering, like, they're stuck in those bad habits, maybe how to grow more in love, that you can be there for other people, that you can make those connections with people.
My first thought is a famous quote. I think it's by D.L. Moody. I'm not 100% sure. It says, to preach the gospel at all times, and when necessary, use words.
Love that.
And I think we've gotten that wrong in most modern, especially evangelical Christianity.
Yeah.
Where we've just browbeat people and crammed everything down their throats. Now, we are commanded in Scripture to spread the gospel to all the ends of the earth. But we show Christ through our lives first, and our words second. So we need to be living examples of Christ's love, of Christ's mission, and spread his gospel in his teachings to all the world, and let people see Christ in us, instead of us just throwing Bibles at them.
Yeah.
There's a great song. I'm worship leader at my church. I just sang the song last week, and it sums it up perfectly. It's called "Yet Not I, but Through Christ in Me." It's not us that are teaching it. It's not us that are changing lives. It's not us that are saving people. It's Jesus. They need to see him in us. So I think that's the key to reaching people, is they need to see how we live our lives, that we are sharing Christ's gospel. We are sharing Christ's love, and people can see the difference in our lives. That hope that I mentioned earlier of salvation, of forgiveness, of redemption. People need to see that in us. And they can see the hope and the love and the peace. The Bible says Christ can give us a peace that passes all understanding. People won't understand how we can go through this life, and how you can look at the world today and see how just messed up it is with pandemics and war and politics and all this sort of stuff, and can see in someone that, I still have hope. I'm not living in despair. I'm not freaking out. I'm not worried. I have hope. My hope is in Jesus Christ. My hope isn't in the president or the former president or whoever else or anybody else. My hope is in Jesus, and that gives me a peace. And if people can see that in me and see that I can have this peace and this hope and this forgiveness, then they'll want that too. And I think that's the way to go about it, is let people see Christ through us, not try to just beat them over the head with a Bible.
Yeah, and I see that with you big time. And that's why I followed you on Twitter, because to me, in my process of just sharing my own shit, I get to see who shares their shit. And the people who judge me, it gets to the point where it's like, oh, they have shame and guilt in their heart where they're pushed. Because for me, in the core of my struggle, it was like, how am I going to be able to people aren't going to look at me the same way? And it was this shame, and like, how am I going to be able to express that to people? But then as I started to go, really using Twitter rather than Twitter using me, and just following just the, whatever the latest thing is, it became so much more powerful. I've come across people like yourself, Zach, and there's other porn coaches popping up too. It's like, this is what it's about. It's like, I want you to win. I want you to, like, there's no guilt and shame. Like, I don't feel guilt and shame. It's like, no, porn is bad, but you're not bad. It's like, hey, we're all fucking going through pain. We're all trying to, we're dealing with generational pain, and just like, how do we get through this together? And it's like, that's when you grow into love. For me and my development of becoming a man and what that means to me, I went through a phase of like, the blue pill, where it was just like, oh, everything's great. I'm just going to be nice to everybody, and it's just all going to work out. I'll treat women nice, and maybe they'll like me. I'll buy flowers and chocolates. And then I went through my bad boy phase, and it was just like, that was the red pill. It's like, no, they're all whatever. And it just like, I don't give a shit. And then I got a lot of attention. So I'm like, oh, that must be working. But it was closing off my heart. So I wasn't allowing anyone to get close. And now it seems to be the real, like, this is where the real waves of they say another level, another devil. This is where the power starts to come in, because it's that straight and narrow path where it's like, no, I'm not a pushover, but I'm also not a tyrant either. And to live with that, it's like, to me, it's I got this from Michael Malice, and I don't know too much of his stuff, but the white pill is like going through hell. It's going through the red pill. Because that I see a lot of the red pill stuff on Twitter, and it's like, it's a higher power, because the blue pill is lower than the red pill. You're going to get more attention, you'll get more validation, but there's another level above that, and you have to be so consistent with your words, your actions. You better not judge anybody, because it's going to come back to you. It's like you're developing character versus personality. I mean, that's what I've seen in my journey. And I applaud you for doing what you're doing, because you've given me strength without maybe even realizing it. I've been on the sidelines watching you. McDermott is ringing a bell too. He's someone who I spoke with. Devin McDermott, someone who's helping other men. And yeah, so, anything you'd like to close with, any last words here in the podcast, and of course, plug away your book, your any other projects you're working on. I shared your Twitter, and maybe if people can send you an email, but any last words, that can help other men who are on this, who resonate with this message.
Absolutely. And my message to all men is you are never without hope. A lot of guys think they're into this and they've tried for years to break free from it and can't do it. They think they're going to get stuck this way forever. And that's not true. If I can break out of this, anybody can. So my message is to never give up, never stop fighting, never quit, never lose hope. You're never too far broken. You're never too far gone. You're never too damaged or anything like that. You can always find recovery. You can always find redemption. You can always find renewal, but you can't give up. So reach out to me, reach out to whoever, reach out for help. This isn't a battle you can fight on your own. You need someone there to guide you, to encourage you, to comfort you, to hold you accountable. So keep fighting, keep doing that. Reach out to me. I do one-on-one coaching with men where I come alongside you and we meet regularly, and I go through my book and my program and everything and my steps that I use to break free from porn and recover in my life. And then I know will help you to break free from that. So I offer one-on-one coaching for that. I have my book, like you mentioned, Living Porn Free, which is available on Amazon. It's also available as a video course where I actually teach it on video as well. You can find out more about me on my website, which is intothewildernessblog.com. I also recently started my own podcast last year and where I'm taking my fight against porn addiction on there, as well as other men's issues as well. So yeah, you can find me on Twitter, like you said, at Timothy Reigle. On Instagram's the same thing, all social media. But yeah, reach out to me at any time. I'm always available to talk to anybody, be willing to help in any way that I can. But yeah, keep fighting, don't give up, and never ever quit. Keep fighting forward, and you can find the freedom that I found and so many other men have found.
Good. Well, I appreciate it, Timothy. And I think, the fact that you are going through, you've had the experience of it. I think you have, you can have more depth on helping people, whereas someone who may be a therapist, and not to say everybody's going to be expressed differently, but living through the experience to me, there's more power there. If I have an alcohol problem, I want to go to someone who's an alcoholic who's overcome it,
Right.
maybe versus someone who read it in a book. They may help me, but someone who's gone through that hell. So thanks again for coming on, brother. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.